Ethan, a man of 42 years, had found his universe in the sprawling embrace of the Appalachian Mountains. His existence was a finely woven tapestry, threads of solitude and an unspoken understanding with the wild making up its core. Deep within the timberland, a good many miles from the closest paved road near Asheville, North Carolina, stood his cabin. It was a structure built of rough-hewn logs, settled into the landscape as if it had always been there, a silent sentinel mirroring his own chosen quietude. This wasn't merely a dwelling, it was a living testament to a life carved out of independence, a pact made with the ancient trees and the fleeting creatures that moved beneath their canopy. Ethan knew the woods, not just as a place he inhabited, but as a complex, breathing entity. He understood its subtle rhythms, the way the wind carried stories through the pines, the almost imperceptible shifts in the animal kingdom that heralded a change in weather or season. There was a quiet reverence in his approach, a profound respect for the untamed heart of this land, a respect he had learned not from books, but from countless sunrises and sunsets observed from his porch, from the silent lessons taught by the enduring mountains themselves. His days were long, punctuated by the honest labor of splitting wood, mending fences, and tending to the small garden that stubbornly wrestled produce from the mountain soil. Yet there was an unburdened quality to his life, a freedom from the clamor and expectations of the world beyond the ridges, allowing his thoughts to wander as freely as the deer through the undergrowth. He found a certain kind of peace in the predictable cycles of nature, a grounding force that steadied his soul, anchoring him to the present moment. He often reflected on how the mountain had shaped him, its rugged beauty molding his character, stripping away the superfluous, leaving only the essential. A crisp October morning dawned, painting the sky in hues of soft gray and pale gold. Ethan began his customary circuit, a route he had walked so many times that his boots seemed to know the way by heart. This wasn't a hunt today, nor was it a practical check of his few, carefully placed trap lines, the kind he hadn't set in years, having long since moved past the need for them. Instead, it was a simple, almost meditative walk, a way to renew his connection to the pulse of his domain. The air was sharp, carrying the invigorating scent of pine needles and damp earth, a fragrance that was as much a part of him as his own skin. Underfoot, the fallen leaves, a rich tapestry of russets, golds, and deep ochres, crunched and whispered, creating a symphony that only the forest could compose. Each step was deliberate, unhurried, a rhythm perfectly attuned to the slow, steady beat of the awakening woods. His senses, honed by years of living off the land, were acutely aware of every rustle in the brush, every shifting shadow, every distant call of a bird. He noted the tracks of a deer that had passed earlier, the disturbed leaves where a foraging squirrel had been at work. He felt the subtle incline of the trail, the rough bark of the trees he brushed past, the cool kiss of the morning air on his weathered face. For a man who sought solitude, these walks were not lonely. They were a profound communion, a quiet dialogue between himself and the vast, intricate life that surrounded him. He recalled his father, a man of few words, teaching him to read the forest, not just for game, but for its stories, its hidden meanings. The woods, his father had once said, his voice as rough as bark, they speak if you listen right. And Ethan had listened, for decades, learning a language older than any human tongue. Then, a sound. It wasn't the familiar sudden shriek of a hawk circling high above, nor the low, contented grunt of a boar rooting through the forest floor. This sound was different, jarringly so. Low, guttural, yet unmistakably a moan of pure, unadulterated agony. It tore at the quiet fabric of the morning, a ragged rip in the otherwise seamless tapestry of forest sounds. It came from deeper in the woods, from a direction Ethan rarely ventured, a less trodden path that twisted away from his usual circuits, disappearing into a dense thicket of rhododendrons and ancient gnarled oaks. He paused, every muscle in his body tensing, his breath catching in his throat. His mind, usually so clear and rational, raced to identify the source. A bear caught in a rockfall? A deer injured by a hunter's errant shot? But the sound persisted, a continuous, mournful lament that spoke of prolonged suffering, a pain that went beyond a quick injury. It pulled at something deep within him, an instinctive recognition of distress that transcended the usual boundaries between species. He felt a cold knot form in his stomach, a premonition of something grim, something out of place in the natural order he so respected. The less trodden path, usually ignored, now seemed to beckon, shrouded in an unsettling silence, broken only by that distant, sorrowful cry. He hesitated for only a moment, a flicker of doubt crossing his mind. This was the wild, and intervention often came with its own dangers. But the sound, that raw, desperate plea, held him captive, urging him forward, into the deeper, darker heart of the woods, a place that suddenly felt heavy with an unfamiliar, unsettling presence. It was a sound that reminded him of a time long past, a childhood memory of a stray dog whimpering by the roadside, a forgotten sorrow that now echoed in the mountain air. The path, barely more than a deer trail, narrowed further, twisting deeper into a part of the forest that felt older, more secluded. The towering pines here grew closer, their needles forming a dense, dark canopy that filtered the morning light into dappled, shifting patterns on the forest floor. The air grew heavier, colder, carrying the damp, earthy scent of decaying leaves and ancient moss. Ethan moved with the silent grace of a predator, his senses on high alert, every fiber of his being tuned to the environment. The distant moaning continued, a ragged, broken sound that seemed to pull at the very roots of the trees, a testament to profound and relentless suffering. It was no longer just a sound, it was a presence, a heavy cloak of anguish settling over the clearing ahead. He pushed through a thicket of gnarled rhododendrons, their leathery leaves brushing against his jacket, momentarily obscuring his vision. The undergrowth here was denser, less forgiving, as if guarding a secret the forest wished to keep. He emerged into a small, shadowed clearing, a natural amphitheater ringed by ancient hemlocks whose branches wept long beards of lichen. What he saw there froze him mid-stride, a tableau of raw, brutal despair that stole the breath from his lungs. A magnificent gray wolf, a creature of myth and wild beauty, lay thrashing weakly on the ground. Its fur, a rich tapestry of silver, charcoal, and tawny hues, was matted and dusty, clotted with dark, glistening patches of blood. Its powerful foreleg, thick with muscle and sinew, was caught in the cruel, unforgiving steel jaws of a leg-hold trap. The device, a relic of a bygone era, looked like something wrenched from a nightmare, heavy, rusty, and utterly merciless. The wolf's breath came in ragged, shallow gasps, each exhalation a visible struggle. A low, continuous whimper, the sound that had drawn Ethan, escaped its muzzle, a sound so utterly devoid of the usual wild dignity that it was almost unbearable. Its eyes, usually sharp and wary, were now wide with a mixture of pain, terror, and a primal, uncomprehending agony. They fixed on Ethan, not with aggression, but with a desperate, pleading vulnerability that pierced him to the core. The sight was a physical punch to the gut, a blow that reverberated through his entire being. This was no common coyote, no opportunistic fox caught in a farmer's snare. This was a formidable predator, a symbol of the wild's enduring spirit, its untamed, indomitable will. To see such a creature, a living embodiment of freedom and strength, reduced to a trembling, suffering heap, its powerful body contorted in a futile struggle against an inanimate object, was an affront to everything Ethan understood about the wilderness. The sheer brutality of the trap, its archaic design, a testament to human cruelty, was horrifying. He could see the deep lacerations where the steel had bitten into flesh, the bone-deep damage that surely lay beneath. The wolf's quiet, desperate struggle, the way it tried to pull free with a strength that was rapidly failing, and the undeniable soul-searing pain in its eyes, shook Ethan to his core. He couldn't believe such a majestic creature could be brought so low, its wildness so utterly violated, its spirit so brutally confined. A wave of nausea washed over him, followed by a surge of pure, unadulterated rage. Rage at the unknown trapper, rage at the senselessness of it all, rage at the universe for allowing such suffering. He had seen death in the woods, the swift, clean death of the hunt, the inevitable decay of the old and weak. But this was different. This was a slow, agonizing torture, a deliberate act of malice, or perhaps careless indifference. His mind reeled, trying to process the image, to reconcile the wild, free wolf he knew with this broken, whimpering creature before him. It was a violation of the natural order, a discordant note in the symphony of the forest.
He stood there, transfixed, the cold seeping into his bones, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs, a silent witness to a tragedy unfolding in the heart of the wild. The air, already heavy, now seemed to press down on him, thick with the scent of fear, blood, and the metallic tang of the trap. He felt a profound helplessness, a sense of being utterly out of his depth in the face of such raw, unmitigated suffering. Fear warred with a profound sense of compassion within him, a silent, internal battle raging in the shadowed clearing. This was a wild animal, a creature of instinct, unpredictable, dangerous even in its weakened state. He knew the stories, the cautionary tales of injured predators turning on their would-be saviors. His survival instincts, honed over decades of living on the edge of civilization, screamed at him to retreat, to leave it to its fate. It was the law of the wild, after all. The strong survive, the weak perish. To interfere was to invite peril, to step into a realm where human rules did not apply. He could simply walk away, let nature take its course, let the cold embrace of the forest claim another victim. Or, if he were truly merciful, he could end its misery quickly, a single, decisive shot to spare it further agony. He carried his hunting knife, a sturdy blade always at his hip, and his rifle was back at the cabin. But the thought of taking a life, even to alleviate suffering, twisted his gut. He was a man who respected life, even when he had to take it for sustenance. But then the wolf whimpered again, a soft, almost human sound, and its eyes, glazed with exhaustion and pain, met his. In that gaze, Ethan saw not just a predator, but a living being, trapped and terrified, pleading for something it couldn't articulate. The raw, unadulterated suffering, the silent plea in its eyes, ignited a different, more powerful impulse within him.
It was a call to a deeper humanity, a moral imperative that transcended logic and self-preservation. A choice, stark and undeniable, presented itself, stark as the bare branches against the autumn sky. Leave it to die, end its misery quickly, or risk everything to help. The thought of walking away, of leaving this magnificent creature to a slow, agonizing death, felt like a betrayal, a stain on his soul that the solitude of the mountains could never wash clean. It wasn't about heroism, it was about an innate sense of right and wrong, a deep-seated empathy that he usually kept buried beneath layers of stoicism. He remembered his great-aunt Elara, a woman who had lived even deeper in these mountains, a healer and a storyteller, who always said, "Even the wildest heart has a right to kindness, Ethan, especially when it's broken." Her words, long forgotten, now echoed in his mind, urging him forward. He couldn't just stand by. He couldn't. The wild had given him so much: sustenance, peace, a home. Now it was asking something of him, a profound test of his character, a moment that would define his connection to this land more than any hunt or harvest ever could. He knew the risks were immense. A single bite, a swipe of a powerful paw, could cripple him, or worse. But the image of those pleading eyes, the sound of that broken whimper, overrode every instinct for self-preservation. He would help. He had to. Driven by an instinct he barely understood, a primal call to compassion that resonated with the ancient spirit of the woods, Ethan made his decision. He would try to free the wolf. He began to approach, slowly, deliberately, each step measured, his movements as fluid and unthreatening as he could make them. He spoke in a low, soothing tone, a voice he usually reserved for his loyal old dog, Boone, a grizzled red-bone coonhound who often accompanied him on his patrols. "Easy there, fella," he murmured, his voice a gentle rumble in the quiet clearing. "Easy now."
"I'm not gonna hurt you, just trying to help." The wolf, despite its pain and terror, responded. Its head, heavy with exhaustion, lifted slightly, its hackles rising, a guttural growl rumbling deep in its chest. Its teeth, long and sharp, were bared, a clear warning. But its eyes, though wary and filled with a wild fear, held a flicker of something that wasn't pure, unadulterated aggression. It was a raw, primal intelligence, assessing him, trying to discern his intentions. It was a desperate animal, yes, but not a mindless one. It watched him, every muscle tensed, ready to strike, but also, perhaps, listening. Ethan continued to speak, his words a steady stream of soft reassurances, keeping his voice calm and low, trying to project an aura of non-threat. He moved in a wide arc, avoiding direct eye contact for prolonged periods, a gesture of respect in the animal world, while still keeping the wolf in his peripheral vision. He slowly knelt, careful not to make any sudden movements, his hands held open, palms visible, a universal sign of peace. He observed the trap, a heavy, rusty-jawed contraption, its steel teeth cruelly embedded in the wolf's leg. It was a brutal design, meant to hold fast, to break bone and spirit. He noted the heavy springs, the release mechanism, trying to mentally rehearse the delicate and dangerous task ahead. The air was thick with the coppery smell of blood and the sharp tang of fear, both the wolf's and, he admitted to himself, his own. He could feel the adrenaline coursing through his veins, a cold tremor in his hands, but he forced himself to focus, to breathe deeply, to channel his fear into a razor-sharp concentration. This wasn't just about freeing an animal, it was about a moment of profound connection, a test of his own courage and compassion in the face of the wild's unforgiving nature.
The wolf watched him, its body trembling, its head low, but the snarling had lessened, replaced by a low, continuous whimper that tore at Ethan's heart. He knew he had to act quickly, before the animal's strength completely gave out, or before its fear turned into an irreversible, desperate attack. He was acutely aware of the wolf's powerful jaws, its sharp claws, the sheer force it could still muster despite its injuries. One wrong move, one moment of carelessness, and he could be severely injured, left alone in the deep woods, miles from help. The weight of that realization pressed down on him, but it also sharpened his resolve. He had to be precise, swift, and utterly fearless. Releasing the powerful spring of the trap proved to be an arduous and perilous task, a dance on the razor's edge between rescue and disaster. Ethan had to get close, dangerously close, to the snarling, terrified wolf. He first tried to use a thick branch he found nearby, attempting to wedge it into the spring mechanism to pry it open. But the wood was too soft, the trap's grip too unyielding. He needed a tool, something with leverage and strength. His eyes scanned the ground frantically, landing on a stout, gnarled root protruding from the base of a hemlock tree. It was thick, solid, and offered the necessary purchase. He moved towards it, slowly, deliberately, his eyes never leaving the wolf's. Each movement from Ethan caused the wolf to flinch, its head snapping towards him, its teeth clicking just inches from his hand, a chilling sound that echoed the trap's own metallic bite. A guttural growl rumbled continuously in its chest, a low, constant threat that vibrated through the ground. Ethan worked with a desperate urgency, his own heart pounding against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the silent clearing. The scent of blood, rich and coppery, mingled with the acrid smell of fear, thick in the cold air. He knew that one wrong move, one moment of hesitation, could mean a serious injury, a torn hand, a lacerated arm, or worse. The wolf, despite its agony, was still a formidable creature, its instincts screaming at it to defend itself from this strange, two-legged intruder. He carefully positioned the root, trying to find the leverage point on the trap's heavy spring. He pushed, grunting with effort, his muscles straining. The wolf let out a sharp, pained yelp, pulling against the trap, its body convulsing. Ethan flinched back, narrowly avoiding a snap of its jaws. "Easy, easy, big guy," he whispered, his voice hoarse, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "Just a little more, almost there." He could feel the immense tension in the spring, the sheer force required to hold it shut. It was designed to break bones, to crush life. He remembered stories of trappers losing fingers, even hands, to these devices. He tried again, applying all his weight, all his strength to the root, levering it against the spring. The metal groaned, a high-pitched, protesting whine that was almost as painful as the wolf's whimpers. He felt the tension build, the resistance of the steel, then a slight give. The wolf let out a low growl, a warning that was more a plea, its eyes wide with a mixture of terror and pain. Ethan pushed harder, sweat beading on his forehead despite the chill. He could feel the blood pulsing in his temples, the strain in his arms. He imagined the pain the wolf must be enduring, the crushing pressure on its bone and flesh, and that image fueled his resolve. He focused on the trap, on the mechanism, trying to ignore the snapping jaws, the powerful, tensed body of the animal just inches away. He knew that even if he freed it, the wolf might still attack, driven by pain and fear. But that was a risk he was willing to take. He had committed to this, and there was no turning back. His hands, calloused and strong from years of labor, were now trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the sheer physical exertion. He could hear the wolf's shallow, rapid breathing, feel the vibrations of its struggle through the ground. This was a battle of wills, a desperate struggle against a cold, unfeeling piece of metal, with the life of a majestic creature hanging in the balance. He braced himself, took a deep breath, and with a final desperate heave, put every ounce of his strength into the root. The metal shrieked again, louder this time, a sound of protest and surrender. With a final desperate heave, the heavy spring mechanism clicked with a jarring metallic clang that echoed through the silent clearing. The trap jaws, which had held the wolf in their cruel embrace, slowly, reluctantly opened, releasing their grip. The wolf, free from its metallic prison, collapsed with a soft thud, its powerful body hitting the damp earth, panting heavily. A shudder ran through its frame, a tremor of exhaustion and relief, but also of profound shock. Its eyes, now glazed with exhaustion and pain, remained fixed on Ethan, a complex mixture of terror, confusion, and perhaps a flicker of something akin to recognition. The growl had subsided, replaced by a series of low, broken whimpers, sounds of profound relief mixed with residual agony. Ethan, still cautious, his heart still hammering, took a tentative step back, giving the wolf space. The air was thick with the smell of blood and the raw tang of its fear. He watched the wolf, expecting it to bolt, to try and escape, but it merely lay there, its breathing shallow, its body trembling. It didn't attempt to flee, didn't even try to stand. It just watched him, its gaze unwavering, almost as if waiting for something. It was in this moment, as Ethan slowly, carefully reached out to gently examine the mangled leg, trying to assess the damage and stop the flow of blood, that he noticed something peculiar. Over the wolf's left eye, partially hidden by the matted, blood-stained fur, was a distinctive, faded scar, a crescent moon shape, almost perfectly formed, like a tiny pale brand etched into its skin. A shiver, cold and unexpected, traced down Ethan's spine, raising goosebumps on his arms. He knew that mark. He remembered an old legend, a story his great-aunt Elara had told him by the crackling fire on long winter nights, her voice soft as falling snow. She spoke of Shadowfang, a legendary lone wolf with such a mark, said to roam these very mountains, a protector of the lost, a guardian of the deep woods. The legend claimed Shadowfang was a spirit animal, a creature of immense wisdom and strength, appearing only in times of great need or peril, a silent observer of the human world, occasionally intervening in subtle, mysterious ways. His great-aunt had described the scar in vivid detail, claiming it was a birthmark, a sign of its unique connection to the moon and the ancient spirits of the forest. Ethan, a man of science and pragmatism, had always dismissed such tales as charming folklore, stories to entertain children by the fire. But now, seeing that unmistakable mark on the very wolf he had just freed, a wave of awe and disbelief washed over him. It was as if the ancient stories had suddenly sprung to life, standing before him in flesh and blood, a living legend breathing in the dust and blood of the clearing. The rational part of his mind struggled to find an explanation, a logical reason for this uncanny coincidence. But the sheer weight of the moment, the undeniable evidence before his eyes, silenced his skepticism. He had not just saved a wolf, he had, perhaps, touched something ancient, something sacred, something that defied easy explanation. The encounter had just taken on a dimension far beyond simple animal rescue. He was no longer just a man in the woods. He was a participant in a tale as old as the mountains themselves. The wolf, surprisingly, didn't attempt to flee, nor did it renew its aggressive warnings. It watched him, its breathing shallow, its body still trembling from the ordeal. The intense pain in its leg seemed to hold it captive, but its eyes, still fixed on Ethan, now held a different quality, a mixture of raw instinct, profound exhaustion, and perhaps a nascent flicker of something akin to understanding, even a fragile trust. Ethan, now filled with a strange reverence, a sense of having touched something ancient and mythical, carefully knelt beside the injured creature. He reached into his pack, pulling out a small, worn first aid kit he always carried, a habit born of years in the wilderness, where a minor cut could quickly turn serious. He uncapped a bottle of antiseptic, its sharp scent cutting through the earthy air, and carefully began to clean the wound on the wolf's leg. The trap had done terrible damage. The flesh was torn, and he could see bone fragments, a grim testament to the force of the steel jaws. The wolf whimpered, a low, pained sound, but didn't pull away. It allowed Ethan's touch, its body tensing, but not resisting. He worked with a meticulous, gentle precision, his hands, usually so strong and capable, now moving with a delicate care he rarely employed. He used sterile gauze to wipe away the blood and dirt, then poured the antiseptic over the raw flesh, causing the wolf to flinch and let out a soft groan. I know, Ethan murmured, his voice soft, apologetic. It's gonna sting, but it'll help. He then fashioned a makeshift bandage from a clean strip of his own flannel shirt, tearing it carefully to create a wide, protective wrap. He bound the wound as best he could, not too tightly, but enough to provide some support and keep it clean for a while. It was a crude dressing, but it was all he had, and it was better than nothing. He knew the wolf would need more, much more, to survive this injury in the wild, but this was a start. He looked into its eyes again, those amber pools reflecting the filtered light, and felt a profound connection, a silent pact forged in suffering and compassion. He reached into his pack once more, pulling out a piece of his dried venison jerky, a staple of his wilderness diet. He placed it gently on the ground a few feet from the wolf's nose, a silent offering, a gesture of goodwill. Then, slowly, respectfully, Ethan began to back away, never breaking eye contact with the legendary creature. He moved deliberately, giving the wolf ample space, allowing it to regain some semblance of its wild dignity. The wolf watched him go, its head still low, its body still trembling, but its gaze remained fixed, a silent acknowledgement, a lingering question in its intelligent eyes. Ethan turned and began his slow trek back towards his cabin. The image of Shadowfang, the scent of blood and pine, and the profound weight of the encounter seared into his mind. The wilderness had revealed another layer of its profound mystery, a depth he had only ever glimpsed in his great-aunt's stories. He now carried the weight of a silent pact, a profound connection, forged in suffering and compassion, an unseen thread binding him to this ancient land and its most elusive inhabitant. He knew his life in these mountains, and his understanding of the creatures that roamed them would never be quite the same. The pragmatic, solitary man had been touched by something beyond his comprehension, something that resonated with the deepest, most primal parts of his soul. He would return, he promised himself, to check on the wolf, a silent guardian now bound by an unseen thread, a witness to a moment that had irrevocably altered his perception of the wild. He wondered if the wolf would remember him, if it would allow him to approach again.
He wondered if the legend was true, if Shadowfang truly was a protector, and what this encounter truly meant for him, for the mountains, and for the delicate balance between man and the untamed heart of the world. The journey back was a blur of rustling leaves and shifting shadows, his mind consumed by the image of the wolf, the crescent moon scar, and the silent plea in its eyes. The world around him, so familiar just hours ago, now seemed imbued with a new, deeper magic, a sense of ancient power that had awakened within him. He felt a profound sense of responsibility, a burden and a privilege that would forever shape his days in the silent, whispering embrace of the Appalachians.